This is an episode from LingoQuest Online English Learning Academy. For more episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be tackling something a lot of you have asked about, and that is understanding English, no problem. But then, you try to open your mouth and speak, and it's just like, pulling teeth.
Yeah.
We've got some awesome excerpts to dig into today from Bridging the Understanding Speaking Gap in English Learning. Quite a mouthful, right?
It is, yeah.
But it's going to help us unlock this whole thing,
Yeah.
Why does this gap even exist? Why can some people read English like a pro, but speaking? It's like they're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded or something. It's so weird.
Yeah. I think a good analogy is like you can read sheet music, right? But you can't play the instrument, so you get the notes.
Yeah.
But to actually produce the music, that's where things get
That's
tense.
such a good analogy. I love that. Okay, so this guide, it dives into this whole idea of like passive skills, like reading and listening versus active skills like speaking.
Right.
So how does that play into this whole gap thing? I mean, I get it. Reading a book is different than like, chatting with someone at a cafe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the biggest things is you probably have a way bigger passive vocabulary than an active one.
Oh, 100%.
There's a ton of words that you see when you're reading. You're like, oh, yeah, I know what that means.
Right.
But would you ever use that word in a conversation? Probably not.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Like, remember back in the day studying for the SATs, you'd have to memorize all these crazy words. I mean, who even uses obsequious in real life?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of leads into this idea of automaticity, which the guy talks about, which is like, being able to speak fluently without having to think too hard about every single word or, where to put the verb or like it just flows.
Right.
You think of like a basketball player who can dribble without even looking at the ball.
I love that.
It's like second nature.
That muscle memory, right? You just do it.
Exactly.
But okay, real talk. For me, sometimes it's not even the grammar, it's the sounds. Like English pronunciation can be a real beast sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah.
English has some pretty unique sounds that don't exist in a lot of other languages.
Wow.
Like the "the" sound, for example.
Don't even get me started on that. It's a nightmare.
You have to put your tongue between your teeth and then make this sort of hissing noise. And it's like, whoa, what is that? It's not easy.
It's like tongue yoga or something. It's crazy. And then there's grammar on top of it. I swear I had this moment once trying to explain something in English and I completely butchered like all the verb tenses.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like I was back in like third grade or something. It was so bad.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us. And I think part of that is because speaking requires you to build sentences, in real time, which is a lot harder than just understanding a sentence someone else has already said.
Oh, yeah. It's like you're trying to build a house of cards while riding a unicycle. Like,
Totally. You've got to keep track of so many things at once.
okay, so we've got all these linguistic things going on, but I'm guessing there are other reasons why, people might hit this wall.
Oh, absolutely there are. I think a big one, honestly, is just fear. Like being scared to make mistakes or just feeling self-conscious, speaking a language that's not your native tongue.
Oh my gosh, I feel that. I remember one time I was in Italy trying to order a coffee and I think I accidentally asked for a cat. I don't even...
Oh, no.
It was so bad. Like you just get in your head, right?
Totally.
And actually this guide calls it a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is like so true.
It really is, yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more? I don't fully get it.
Yeah, so it's kind of this vicious cycle where the more we're worried about making mistakes, the less we actually speak. And then the less we speak, the less confident we become, which just feeds the fear.
Oh, I see. It's like a downward spiral.
Exactly.
So we have to like break free from that cycle somehow.
Yeah, you have to kind of push through it. And that's where practice comes in. Because even if you understand, all the grammar rules, if you don't actually speak, you're going to be rusty.
Right. It's just like any other skill.
Yeah, like use it or lose it kind of thing. I feel like everyone's always saying that.
Yeah.
And speaking of practice, the guide talks about this thing called the practice gap.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Yeah, it's basically this idea that even people who understand English really well, if they haven't been speaking it regularly, it can be hard.
Right.
Because you haven't had that practice. Like, think about riding a bike, right? You understand the concept of it.
Right.
But if you haven't ridden a bike in 10 years, you're going to be a little wobbly when you first get on,
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so fear, practice, or lack thereof. What other pitfalls should we be aware of?
Well, another really common one is this thing called the translation trap, which is this tendency to like mentally translate everything word for word. Oh, I do that all the time. Like I'll be trying to, say something and I'll be like, wait, what's the exact word for that? And then it just sounds weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it just doesn't even translate directly, right?
Yeah, because different languages have different ways of expressing things.
Yeah.
It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Right. And actually the guide had this funny example about someone trying to translate like an idiom, literally.
Oh, yeah.
And it just sounded completely bonkers.
Totally.
But like, how do you break out of that? It's such a natural thing to do, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I think one of the keys is just to immerse yourself in the language as much as you can. So, listen to music, watch movies, read books, listen to podcasts.
Oh, so like surround yourself with English.
Exactly. Yeah, even just like thinking to yourself in English, the more you do it,
Right.
the less you'll rely on that mental translation.
Okay, so I've heard that like think in English thing, but I'm not really sure what that even means.
Yeah, it sounds kind of abstract, right?
Yeah.
But it's basically like, instead of translating in your head, like just describe the things around you in English, or even just like narrate your day as you're going about it.
Oh, so like my internal monologue just switches
No.
over.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so immersion. Got it. But I think a lot of people are probably wondering about more like tactical tips,
Yeah.
Like what are some actionable things they can do to improve their speaking skills?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most effective things is just to find a language partner
Mm-hmm.
or, join a conversation group.
Oh, yeah, language exchanges. I love those.
Yeah, they're fun.
It's a great way to meet people.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything super formal, just regular opportunities to chat with other English speakers.
Right, right. But what if you don't have access to like a language partner or a conversation group?
Yeah, well, there's a ton of online resources too. There's all sorts of apps, language learning apps. You can find online forums, virtual conversation groups, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's a good point. And I guess even short, regular conversations would probably make a difference over time, right?
Oh, totally. Consistency is key. Like even if you just do like 15 minutes of speaking practice a day,
Okay.
that's going to be way more beneficial than trying to cram in like an hour once a week.
Right. So it's like little and often.
It's like exercising a muscle.
Yeah.
Like those small, consistent efforts are what's going to give you the best results.
I think that's really encouraging because a lot of people, I think they get intimidated by the idea of like, oh, I have to do, hours and hours of practice.
Yeah.
But if you can just squeeze in little chunks here and there,
Totally.
that's manageable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here, right? We've talked about, the reasons behind this whole understanding but not speaking thing. And we've touched on some cool tips for like actually bridging that gap. But I'm thinking there's one like huge piece missing. And that is confidence. I mean, it's hard to speak when you're like constantly in your head worrying about messing up.
Oh, for sure. Confidence is so key. And actually, this guide has a whole section on confidence building strategies. And one of them, which might sound a little silly, is just speaking to yourself in English.
Wait, really?
Yeah, because it helps you get comfortable with the sounds and the rhythm of the language, without feeling self-conscious. Because it's just you.
I do that sometimes when I'm like trying to work something out or, just kind of like process my thoughts. But I never thought about it as language practice.
Yeah, it totally is. It's like getting those mental gears turning in English, so it becomes more natural. The guide also mentions reading aloud, which, is good for pronunciation and fluency.
Yeah.
And then if you're really brave, you can record yourself speaking and then listen back.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I used to hate listening to recordings of myself. But you know what? It is helpful. You can kind of pick up on things that you wouldn't notice otherwise.
Exactly, yeah. It gives you that like objective feedback. Like maybe you notice you're mumbling certain words or you're rushing through sentences. It's just about becoming more aware.
And I think it's also important to like remember that it's okay to make mistakes.
Right.
We've talked about that fear of making mistakes, but maybe we need to kind of like reframe it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, mistakes are not failures. They're just like opportunities to learn. Think of them as like feedback signals telling you what to work on.
I love that.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off, Trying to be perfect all the time. Are there other ways we can kind of like shift our thinking to, feel more confident and less scared to speak up?
Yeah, I think a big one is just remembering that language is about connection. It's not about perfection. It's about connecting with other people, sharing ideas.
Right. Like the goal is communication.
Exactly.
And that actually makes me think back to what you were saying earlier about thinking in English. Like, if we can actually train our brains to kind of like process information in English, wouldn't that make communication feel more natural?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Because when you're not so busy translating everything in your head,
Yeah.
you can actually be more present in the conversation.
Right. And it's more like authentic.
It gets
It's not like you're reading from a script. It's like an actual, genuine back and forth.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens, when you're really in the flow.
So I guess to like wrap up our deep dive today, the main thing I'm taking away is this is a normal challenge. It's not like something's wrong with you if you're struggling with this. It's totally possible to overcome this.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It just takes, practice, a positive attitude, and just being okay with messing up sometimes, because that's how you learn.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And like we were saying, it's really about connecting with people.
Exactly.
And I think when you remember that, it takes the pressure off.
For sure.
And it makes it more fun.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what? To all our listeners out there working on their speaking skills, remember, progress, not perfection. Keep practicing. You got this.
You got this. That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.